A cold, dank night in late autumn, 1 minute before All Saints' Day. Woe when the clock strikes 12. At this hour, creatures of darkness peel from the shadows. And weird figures get off a streetcar named Cemetery Terminal. It's way beyond closing time, even for Halloween ghosts loath to go home. When cemetery gates creak in the wee small hours, there's something uncanny in the air. Lurking behind the cemetery wall are evil surprises. When cats and badgers are spooked, even witches and vampires shudder.
Zentralfriedhof und alle seine Toten.
Long live the Central Cemetery and its dead, the song goes. Tonight, they'll paint the cemetery red.
Weil der Tod eine Festheit gibt, die ganze lange Nacht. Und von den Gästen keine einzige Eintrittskarten braucht.
Such a grotesque charade. Where else in the world could this be except Vienna? In Vienna, anyone with a certain preference of style can order such a train, complete with costumes, chariot and torchbearers at any time of day or night. It's party time in Vienna's Central Cemetery.
Es lebe der Zentralfriedhof und seine Jubilare.
Famous composers decomposing, the song continues, inaudible to living ears. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Down we must. What's the point in shedding tears? It's cold above and warm below. A little damp, perhaps, you know. At dawn, peace has returned, but a close look reveals a slight movement between the marble plinths. These are the only Viennese who spend their entire lives in the graveyard, not just their afterlives. Most of these lives are led in quiet secrecy. But today, everything is different. Today, no one will remain undisturbed. Today is the Central Cemetery's big day. As soon as the gates open at dawn, crowds pour from the early trams. It's All Saints' Day, an important holiday. Some say Vienna's secret national holiday. On November the 1st, the trams are bursting, as they have been since the days when this was the Bratislava Imperial Road. In the 1920s, not only the bereaved arrived by tram, special carriages also brought the deceased, discreetly, by night. Meanwhile, Vienna's central cemetery looks back on more than 130 winters. Amazing that there's still space for new graves. City planners gave Vienna's central cemetery a generous layout, back when the integration of neighboring communities suddenly raised Vienna's population dramatically. And cemeteries closer to the center were bursting. Since 1922, a crematorium has offered the space-saving option of burial by fire. Today, the 2.5 million square meter area is home to 3 million dead. On All Saints' Day, they are visited by 300,000 living people. In late afternoon, the crowds begin to thin. And when night has settled, all that remains of All Saints are the candles, hundreds of thousands of them. The graveyard is again as silent as a grave. Yet from below there are irreverent noises. For hamsters, this is the night of the year. So many fresh flowers amongst the graves. Temptations wherever you look. It's a hamster's shopping mall. Looting a graveyard may seem a bit unpious, but the tiny grave robbers might be forgiven. They are in a race against time, gathering food for survival. They need to stuff their pouches with whatever they can get, fresh flowers or bird feed, and they carry load after load down into their tunnels. Once the first serious frost arrives, each hamster needs to have stored several kilos. Failing that, come spring, he will stay below ground for good. First thing in the morning, the hamsters are at it again. This is not a time to stay in bed. They can sleep for the next 4 months. The badger has been out and about all night and is on his way home. But the kestrel is wide awake and ready for breakfast. In an open space, a mouse always lives with one foot in the grave. Out there, it's never safe until the closest cover is reached. A good hideaway, as long as the kestrel's perspective doesn't change. Help comes from an unexpected side. The badger has frightened off the kestrel and saved the mouse's life without even noticing. He's after earthworms, and these are found 1 story below. Higher up, green woodpeckers gather this year's berry harvest. While the roe deer clean off the last rosebuds. During these quiet days after All Saints, precipitation is to be expected. But sometimes it's neither icy rain nor early snow. It's raining candles. Crows love wax, which is high in fat content, and when a candle sticks to its plastic cover, they simply throw it down. The impact on the ground frees the wax from the plastic. With so much life all around, one could easily forget the actual purpose of this parkscape. Funeral parties solemnly marching along the paths. Coffins slowly being lowered into the ground. For the living, a last farewell seems to transform the sense of time. Death knows no season. Every day, summer and winter, some 25 people are laid to rest at the central cemetery. Yet sometimes, this place of rest is not as final as expected. Among the arcades, the lid of a catacomb is lifted. For more than a century, the bones of this family have lain in the brick enclosure. The opening of this pompous grave has a mundane reason. After 100 years, there is no one left to pay the rent. Now, the mortal remains are moved to cheaper accommodation. The reasons behind such a move are not always financial. When the central cemetery was opened far beyond the city border, the location was not overly attractive. To heighten the central cemetery's attraction, a few stars were brought in. Ludwig van Beethoven's mortal remains were brought here from another cemetery, as with those of his composer colleagues Franz Schubert and Johannes Brahms. Nowadays, there's no shortage of famous names. Only the icy winter storms that the bereaved had to brave on their long journey beyond the city fringes are still the same. Considerate people, as a Viennese song claims, die in May rather than in December. But then, how much choice does one have in the matter? Lack of choice is also why crows raid the bird feeders that are intended to help little songbirds through the winter. Waxwings are guests from Siberia and northern Europe. Only once every few years do they come here to spend the winter. This habit gave them the reputation of being harbingers of misfortune. Even the plague in the Middle Ages was attributed to them. In Switzerland, they are called death birds to this day. Away from the cleared main footpaths, tracks in the snow are rarely of human origin. The tracks could be those of some 20 roe deer who live in the cemetery area. Until the early 1980s, the roe deer of the Central Cemetery were regularly hunted. Today, they have little to worry about. In winter, they prefer the old Jewish cemetery, with its abundance of evergreen ivy covering the old gravestones. For the deer, it is simply fresh green food at a time when thick snow covers the grass and the marble. After months of foggy grey, spring returns with fresh colour. And the sunlight is again reflected by the polished marble. The local real estate market is also coming alive. Kestrels are in search of prime locations, sometimes in buildings, and sometimes as successors to crows or magpies. Even green woodpeckers will not refuse a second-hand home, but if nothing ready-made is available, they build their own. Competition is fierce. Blue tits don't want to accept what's left over. But the first addresses are already occupied. As soon as the new nesting caves are furnished, it's time to check out the neighbours. Once the accommodation problem is sorted, everyone can focus on the central cause of all this havoc, summoning all their powers of charm and gallantry. Although charm and gallantry mean different things to different characters. To most cemetery visitors, all these goings-on in the canopy of avenue trees, gravestones and decorative shrubbery are lost. But the kestrel's mating is hard to miss. And the great spotted woodpecker's mating dance in mid-air is anything but inconspicuous. The first families to produce offspring are traditionally hares. Dozens of them have made the cemetery their permanent home, and every spring their numbers rise. These bunnies are trying hard to be invisible. In a graveyard, death is never far. Young tawny owls may not be experienced hunters, but they are born with an instinct. Whenever some small furry thing stirs on the ground, the owl attacks. The victim doesn't readily accept its role. This is a case for a more experienced hunter. But a miss is as good as a mile. The kestrel swoops again. Again, cheekiness wins. The little hare has instincts too. In any case, a hare is probably too large for a kestrel to carry away. This now is catch and carry size. The kestrel carries its quarry off to St. Borromeus Chapel. On a window ledge on the impressive Art Deco structure, a pair of kestrels have added to the architecture. The screaming chaos and havoc found in the nests of songbirds is unknown here. Kestrel chicks seem incredibly well-mannered, but the truth is, there's simply more food than they can manage. Falcons are more chilled in other ways as well. In their nest high above the cemetery, they are safe from enemies. All they need to do is eat and grow, and avoid falling off. Nesting in the lower canopies means always expecting the worst. Red-backed shrikes rarely place their nests in the bushes higher up than 2 meters. Notorious egg thieves, like the stone marten, can easily scramble up to these nests. Martens often do not eat the eggs at once, but carry them to a lair. But the champions of stock keeping are the hamsters. Their extensive tunnel systems undermine the entire cemetery. Only a few days ago, a handful of hamster babies have been born in this burrow. The mother drops in several times a day, and when she does, the blind babies immediately dock onto her for a refill. The generation gap begins with differing opinions about what's enough. The little ones certainly press their point. Leaving the babies in such disarray is against a mother's instinct. She can't leave without getting the place into shape. But as soon as she's ready to go, they're at it again. And it's the same mess as before. Fortunately, some things take care of themselves. After a while, they've all found their way back to the warm nest. Spring is a bustling season, especially in a graveyard that brings together all kinds of persuasions. On Easter Monday, Syrian Orthodox Christians congregate to pray for peace for their dead. Prayer is followed by a sort of graveyard picnic. Some Easter customs are obviously remnants of pagan days. A few hundred meters up the path, there is a Buddhist cemetery surrounding a stupa. Ever since it was founded, the central cemetery has been multicultural, and the number of cultures has steadily increased. Consequently, in Vienna, death has many faces and many names. Not all the burials here follow an official rite. There are even rumours of illegal burials in remote corners. That way, family members who would otherwise be excluded from the city of the dead are also given a worthy place of rest. In such cases, the bereaved themselves carry the digging tools as well as the loved one. Here rests in peace a well-loved guinea pig. But the wild rodents next door are very much alive. With pouches stuffed to the point of bursting, a mother hamster dives down into the burrow. Meanwhile, her young have switched from milk to solid food, which mother unpacks. All sorts of goodies. Best of all, a fat, juicy worm. Each wants their share. The seeds are forgotten. The taste of the outside world makes them impatient to also see it. But they've hardly had a glimpse of daylight when the mother ushers them back down. If you're not careful, life in the cemetery can be very short and death very long. The badger isn't interested in impaled carcasses. It always keeps its nose close to the ground. What could be taken as remnants of an obscure voodoo ritual is really a shrike's lair. At first sight, the small songbirds seem all pretty and harmless. At this time of year, there is little left to impale. Everything they catch goes straight to the mouths of the chicks. Big insects, or bits of lizard or frog meat. Redback shrikes need wild shrubbery for nesting. In Vienna, a metropolitan biotope protection program makes sure that such areas persist or even spread. In the central cemetery, such wild islands are maintained between the more manicured areas. A badger couldn't care less about such a fuss. Its principle of life is simple. Wherever the soil is dug up and loose is where it pokes its nose. It's a habit that hasn't endeared the badger to grave owners, who pride themselves on their gardening skills. But before the investigation is complete, it's interrupted by a startling noise. Digging here was premature in any case. For a lover of insect larvae, the harvest comes a few days later. That none of us would escape this fate is not exactly a pleasant thought. But there could be worse. Being buried alive is the nightmare of nightmares. To prevent unpleasant underground adventures, up to the late 19th century, people were routinely stabbed in the heart before burial. Other, more precautious contemporaries had an alarm bell installed in the coffin just in case. There are no records to suggest that this device ever did save lives. Each morning, as reliable as a clock, the gentlemen from the Metropolitan Undertaker's office start their duty. Armed with broom, shovel and pickaxe. Their arrival is carefully monitored. As a young hamster, you take great care not to cross the pickaxe man from the number 43 municipal department. Again and again, the diggers cut through hamster tunnels. All a hamster can do is to run. But some youngsters, paralyzed by panic, forget even that. It's rare that these men break new ground. 12 years after a burial, a grave is ready for the removal of old bones and the placement of a new corpse. Whether new or used, excavating a grave is always back-breaking work. For each grave, a man digs 3 to 6 hours until the legal minimum depth of 2.7 meters is reached. Meeting curious or indignant hamsters is just part of the job. The remains of the previous owner are reburied in a more space-saving way, deeper down in the same grave. Applying a time-proven alpine technique, the men leave their workplace. In the cemetery's loftier spheres, a big moment is approaching. Among the turrets of St. Borromeus Chapel, the fledgling kestrels are about to take off into the world. As soon as the most courageous of them dives into the unknown deep and survives the half-controlled drop to the ledge 20 meters below, the others have no choice but to follow suit. It's hardest for the last one. The best landing place is already occupied. Every minute in the air boosts their courage. The kestrels test their abilities, and this architecture seems specially made for the purpose. So far, the church tower has been the kestrel's entire radius of action. Now, having learned to rely on its wings, the first of the fledglings glides off into a bigger world. Soon, the entire group of siblings is all over the cemetery, exploring. For a while, each sortie ends where it started. Kestrels are not in a hurry to grow up. For weeks after they've learned to fly, their parents still feed them. During summer, the graves of honor attract a constant flow of visitors. The Mozart Memorial is a popular center of attraction. However, all the millions of photographs don't show the fact that Mozart is not really buried here, due to a lack of mortal remains. All the other music celebrities of yesteryear are here in person, below the obelisks. Such pomp and circumstance only happens once in a blue moon. Witnessing a real state funeral is a historic privilege. The solemn train is always attended by a mix of true sympathy and true voyeurism. Some of the fence-sitters simply wonder what's going on. But for most, the brass and drums and firing of salutes is reason for a quick retreat. In contrast, the human section of Vienna's population has always shown a morbid interest in opulent funeral rites. Be it an emperor, a prime minister, or a famous actor who has exited the stage of life, the staging of the final journey has always been a great source of public satisfaction. Such a decorative necropolis is, of course, a perfect setting, especially when lit by a golden autumn sun. Meanwhile, this year's entire new generation has grown up, even the kestrels. From gravestone to gravestone they flutter, checking every movement in the dry leaves. Mice are fast and agile, but they often fail to look up. This is normally the end of the hunt. Except when competition is around and envy fills the air. The attacker simply drops from his perch. With beak and claws, he harasses the hunter, who in shock drops the mouse. Before it can say beep, the mouse has a new owner. Gulping the quarry down fast is essential. The next kestrel could drop from the sky at any moment. The last autumn colours are washed out by grey mists, a sure sign that Vienna's secret national holiday is again approaching. Everyone prepares for the big day, each in his own manner. Behind the cemetery walls and before the three main gates. Most Viennese come here only once a year. Yet, Vienna's central cemetery is a lively place and full of little secrets. As the song goes, long live the Central Cemetery.
Sie liegen und sie verföhnt schon dort seit über 100 Jahren. Der Rost ist kalt und der Rund ist warm, nur manchmal ein bisschen feucht. Aber wenn man so drunter freut man sich, wenn's grad noch an der leucht. Es lebe der Zentralfriedhof, auf einmal macht's ein Stolzer. Da muss er sich's wie akkaliert und die Schrammen spülen den Walzer.